All right, so we're diving deep into Atomic Habits today by James Clear. It's all about unlocking that potential, for building a successful life and how these tiny changes, these atomic habits, can really get you there.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about Atomic Habits is this shift in focus. It's not just about hitting like a specific goal. It's about, becoming the type of person who just achieves those things naturally, right? Like
Yeah.
it's about identity shift. And habits are like the secret sauce.
Yeah, it's like instead of, I don't know, saying, I want to lose 10 pounds, you're saying, I want to be a healthy person. And
Exactly.
then the habits that kind of support that identity just start falling into place.
Exactly. So let's like dig into that. This idea of like small changes leading to big results. Clear talks about this thing. It's called the plateau of latent potential. You ever
Got
feel
it.
like you're putting in the work but not seeing the payoff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's like the most discouraging thing.
Right. That's the plateau happening. It's like imagine an ice cube melting. You don't see much change at first, but then bam, it hits 32 degrees and suddenly it transforms into water.
Right.
So those consistent efforts, they might seem invisible for a while, but then you hit that tipping point and boom, the results, they just become undeniable.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. So how do we push past that plateau? How do we start seeing those big results?
Well, Clearer really emphasizes this, like making a plan, a specific plan. He talks about this British study
Yeah.
where they found that people who wrote down exactly when and where they would exercise, like what day, what time, what location, they were way more likely to actually do it, more than twice as likely.
Wow, so it's not just about like intention, it's about having that clear roadmap, for
Yeah,
action.
yeah, precisely. He calls them implementation intentions,
Mm.
and they're super effective because you're taking out the guesswork. Instead of just vaguely being like, oh, I should exercise more, you're actually making a commitment.
It makes sense. If you don't know when you're going to do something or where you're going to do it, it's so easy to just be like, later.
Exactly. And this links back to that idea of, identity-based habits. Remember that quote, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Yeah, that is such a powerful, powerful concept.
Right.
Because if we're not being intentional about our actions, we might be like voting for a version of ourselves that we don't even really want.
That's such a good point. It makes you really think about the choices you're making every day and whether those choices are really aligning with the person you want to be. Are you building habits that are supporting that vision?
So, how do we go about actually building those habits? So, Clear breaks down any habit into this like four-stage loop, right? Cue, craving, response, and reward.
And, understanding that loop, it's super crucial. It's like having a blueprint for habit formation, for why some habits stick and others just totally don't.
Yeah, and like he talks about how powerful visual cues are.
Right.
I mean, he mentions that almost half of our brain's resources are devoted to vision.
It's incredible, right?
Hmm.
So like designing your environment, your physical space to support your habits can be such a game changer.
Yeah.
It's about surrounding yourself with those cues, those things that trigger the behaviors you want,
Yeah.
and removing those pesky ones that lead you astray.
So, like, if you're trying to eat healthier, like, you'd keep a bowl of fruit on the counter and not a jar of cookies, in plain sight.
Exactly. It's like you want to make that desired action like the easiest choice,
Mm.
the most obvious choice. But, it's more than just cues. We have to look at that craving stage of the loop too.
Right, because even with the right cues, if you don't actually want to do something, you're probably not going to do it.
You got it. And that's where this dopamine spike thing comes in.
Hmm.
Clear talks about how anticipation of a reward, that's what drives our actions. And the bigger the anticipation, the stronger the drive.
Hmm. So what about this temptation bundling idea? How does that work in real life?
Okay, so think about something you love doing, like listening to your favorite podcast,
Okay.
and something you need to do but always put off,
Mm.
like exercise.
Right.
So you combine them.
Okay.
You listen to your podcast while you exercise, and you're basically making that task, more enjoyable.
It's like you're tricking your brain into associating something, maybe unpleasant with something that you actually look forward to.
Exactly. And you see this everywhere. Like Clear talks about the Polgar sisters. They were raised in this chess-obsessed household. So chess, which can be pretty challenging,
Right.
became a fun, enjoyable part of their life. And guess what? All three sisters became chess grandmasters.
Wow. So it's amazing how powerful our environment can be in shaping our habits, whether we're like aware of it or not.
Totally. And we've been talking about making good habits more appealing, but, we got to address breaking bad ones too. And for that, Clear says the key is making them unattractive.
Yeah, we've all been there staring at that jar of cookies, right? Like it's easier said than done to make bad habits unattractive.
It is, but even a little friction can make a big difference.
Hmm.
So for example, if you're like a late-night snacker,
Uh-huh.
try putting those tempting treats out of sight, like way in the back of the cupboard or up high. You'd be surprised how much less likely you are to reach for them if they're not staring you in the face.
It's about making that undesirable choice less convenient, less tempting.
Exactly. And then once you've kind of set the stage, the next step is repetition. Like, you know that saying, neurons that fire together wire together? The more you repeat something, the more it becomes like second nature.
So it's not about, changing everything overnight. It's about consistency,
Right.
repetition.
And Clear actually debunks that whole 21 days myth. It's not about time passing, it's about frequency. And to make starting easier, he has this thing he calls the 2-minute rule.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the 2-minute rule?
It's super simple, but effective. You basically scale down your new habit to something that takes less than 2 minutes to do.
Okay.
Like, let's say you want to read more. Commit to just reading 1 page a day.
Okay.
Want to meditate? Aim for just 2 minutes.
Oh, that's so smart.
Right.
Because it takes away that initial feeling of being overwhelmed.
Exactly. You want to build momentum. Once you've got that 2-minute habit down, then you can gradually increase it, make it longer, more complex.
Okay, so we've got the cue, the craving, the response. What about the reward? How do we make sure these good habits actually feel good, especially when the benefits, might take a while to show up?
Great question. Our brains love instant gratification, so we need strategies to make those long-term benefits feel real now. And that's where that fourth law of behavior change comes in, making it satisfying.
And I know Claire talks about visual measurement, right? Like those habit trackers.
Yeah.
Or even just moving paper clips from one jar to another as you complete a task.
Yeah. Those visuals, they can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah.
It's like you're giving yourself a little pat on the back every time you follow through.
Right.
And, on that note, speaking of motivation, Clear also talks about accountability. It can give you that extra push, especially when you're feeling tempted to just give up.
I'm curious about that. What are some good ways to build accountability into our habit building?
Well, he shares this example of Brian Harris, an entrepreneur. He used what he calls a habit contract to reach his weight loss goals.
Habit contract. What is that?
It's basically a written agreement. You make it with yourself, and you can even involve accountability partners. You outline specific consequences, if you don't follow through on your commitments.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So it's like having a personal trainer, but for your habit.
Exactly. It makes you think twice before skipping out.
That's clever. But building good habits, it is a long game, isn't it? It's all about consistency and patience.
It is. It is. It's about playing the long game, finding the habits that work for you, which Clear talks about a lot.
Yeah, and he uses that example of Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator.
Yeah.
He combined his skills in drawing and humor to create this successful career. He didn't try to be the best at everything. He just focused on what he was already good at.
Exactly. It's about recognizing your strengths and, figuring out how to use them in a way that feels authentic and enjoyable, building a life that actually supports you.
That's so inspiring. It reminds us that we don't have to fit into some pre-made mold for success. We can make our own path, just by embracing who we are.
Yeah. And one of the most important takeaways from Atomic Habits is showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it.
So it's not about waiting for that motivation to just magically appear.
Exactly. Even top performers, athletes, musicians, you name it, they have days when they just don't feel motivated.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right. But the difference is they have built systems to keep them consistent, no matter how they're feeling.
So it's not just about willpower.
It's about creating a structure that makes it hard to fail.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like setting yourself up for success by designing an environment that supports your goal.
Exactly. And this comes back to, those identity-based habits. It's about becoming the type of person who shows up, who follows through, who doesn't let those setbacks, throw them completely off track.
And how do we become that person? Is it just like a decision we make?
Well, it's more than just a decision. It's about cultivating that new identity. And a really powerful way to do that is through reflection and adjustment.
I'm a big fan of reflection, taking time to look back, on your progress, the challenges, what's working.
Yeah.
It's so valuable.
Yeah. Clear agrees. He really emphasizes that building habits is an ongoing thing. It's not a one-time deal. You've got to regularly evaluate how it's going, see where you can improve, and then adjust.
So it's like taking your habits in for a checkup, making sure everything is still running smoothly.
Exactly. You want to make sure your habits are still working for you, that they're still aligned with your goals and values. Clear even suggests doing a yearly review of your habits. Looking back at what you accomplished and setting new intentions for the year ahead.
I love that. Like a yearly check-in with yourself, a
Mhm.
chance to reflect and recalibrate. And, Clear doesn't just talk about how to change your habits, but why. Like why they matter so much.
Yeah, he argues that habits are more than just actions. They're like the building blocks of our character,
Yeah.
shaping who we are, who we become.
It's about building a life that reflects our values, one that feels authentic and meaningful.
Exactly. And it's not about chasing this perfect happiness either.
Because we all know that happiness, it comes and goes.
Right. He even quotes someone who says happiness is the space between one desire being fulfilled and a new desire forming.
It's like we're on this treadmill of desires, As soon as we reach one goal, we're already on to the next.
Totally.
Hmm.
That's not a bad thing. Clear says that pursuing those desires is what gives our lives meaning, purpose. It's about enjoying the journey, the process of becoming, rather than just focusing on the end goal.
That's such a freeing way to think about it. It takes the pressure off, like needing to have it all figured out. It allows us to embrace the messiness of growth, of self-discovery.
I love that. And one of the coolest things Claire points out is that our feelings and actions, they're totally connected. Like, he comes back to that four-stage habit loop, but this time he's talking about the role of emotions.
Okay, so it's not just cue, craving, response, reward. It's also about how we feel at each stage.
Exactly. He says, how we feel influences how we act, and how we act influences how we feel. So it's this dynamic between our emotions and behaviors that shape our habits and our lives.
It makes me think of that saying, fake it till you make it. If we can choose to act in a way that matches the person we want to be, even when we don't feel like it, maybe those actions can actually change how we feel over time.
It's like you're priming the pump for positive emotions. And as those positive emotions become more frequent, they become part of you. And that fuels you to keep doing those positive actions. It's this like upward spiral of growth.
It's so interesting how Clear compares the environment our ancestors lived in to like the one we're in now. He calls them the immediate return environment versus the delayed return environment.
Oh, that's a cool distinction.
Hmm.
It makes sense when you
Yeah.
think about it. Like our ancestors were all about survival, right?
Mm,
Finding food, shelter, avoiding danger. They needed those instant rewards to stay alive.
exactly. But today, like so many of our goals, building a career, getting healthier, learning new skills, they take time, consistent effort over a long period. And the rewards, they're way down the line, which makes it harder to stay motivated.
It's like we're wired for a world that doesn't exist anymore. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we make those good habits, the ones with the long-term benefits, how do we make those feel good like right now? Well, Clear has some really clever techniques for that. One thing he highlights is using what he calls reinforcement strategies to make the whole process like more rewarding.
I love that. Making those good habits feel good. What kind of reinforcement strategies are we talking about?
He gives this example of a sales rep who, get this, he moved paper clips from one jar to another every time he made a sales call.
Okay.
Sounds simple, right?
Yeah.
But that visual, seeing that progress, it gave him a sense of accomplishment. It made all those calls feel worthwhile.
It's like a tangible reminder that you're moving forward, even if you can't see that big result yet.
Exactly. And even, way back in the 1700s, Benjamin Franklin, he did something similar. He had this little notebook, and he tracked his progress in developing different virtues, marking down his successes and failures every day.
Wow. So these habit building ideas, they've been around forever.
It really is fascinating. And Clear makes the point that it doesn't have to be complex. Even just checking things off your to-do list, they can give you a little feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, like a tiny celebration each time you follow through.
Exactly. And here's another interesting one. When you're trying to break a bad habit, try making doing nothing enjoyable.
Wait, what? How do you make doing nothing enjoyable? I don't get it.
Okay, so let's say you're trying to cut back on, I don't know, screen time.
Right.
Instead of focusing on what you're not doing, like I can't look at my phone, create a space where you can enjoy doing something else. Make it relaxing, inviting. Read a book, listen to music, meditate, whatever feels good. The idea is to start associating positive feelings with not doing that bad habit.
So it's about finding a healthier way to meet that need.
Exactly. And this brings up another important point, finding the habits that actually work for you.
Because something that works for one person might not work for another,
That's
right?
for sure. Claire talks about how, like, Our personalities, what we're naturally inclined to do, even our genes, they all play a role in which habits are easier for us to stick to. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So it's about figuring out your own strengths and weaknesses and finding a path that, feels authentic, something you can actually stick with.
He has this great line. He says, if you can't find a game where the odds are in your favor, create one. And he uses Scott Adams, again, the Dilbert guy. Adams combined his love of drawing with his sense of humor, and he created this totally unique career path. He didn't try to be the best artist or the funniest comedian. He just used what he had to make something new.
That's so cool. It's like playing to your strengths and designing a life that fits you.
Exactly. Find your own recipe for success, and probably the most important thing is showing up consistently, even when you just don't feel like it.
Yeah, that's where things get hard, right? Life gets in the way, we get busy, tired, discouraged. It's so easy to let those habits slip.
But, think about it. Even those top performers, the athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, they have those days too.
Oh, for sure. They're human, right?
Right, but the difference is they have systems. Systems that support consistency no matter what.
So it's not about relying on willpower alone.
Nope. It's about building a structure, a system that makes it harder to fail.
So setting yourself up for success by creating an environment that actually supports your goals.
Exactly. It all comes back to those identity-based habits. Becoming the kind of person who shows up, who follows through, who doesn't let setbacks completely derail them.
And how do we become that person? Is it as simple as just deciding to be that way?
It's more than just deciding. It's about really cultivating that new identity. And a really powerful way to do that is through reflection and adjustment.
I'm all about reflection, like taking time to think about your progress, the good, the bad, those wins. It's so helpful.
Clear's right there with you. He says, building good habits, it's an ongoing process. It's not like you set it and forget it. You've got to regularly evaluate, figure out what needs to change, and then adjust.
So it's like those regular checkups, but for your habits.
Exactly. He even suggests like a yearly review. Sit down, look back at your habits, what you've accomplished, and set new intentions for the year ahead.
Love that. Like a yearly check-in with yourself. Time to reflect and make sure you're on track. And it's so interesting how Clear doesn't just focus on how to change your habits, but why. Like why they even matter.
He's making the point that habits, they're more than just actions. They're like the foundation of who we are. They shape us.
It's about building a life that's in line with what we believe in, what we want to achieve.
Right. A life that has meaning. And it's not about this like constant pursuit of perfect happiness either.
Because newsflash, happiness doesn't last forever.
Right. And Clear actually quotes someone who says, happiness is the space between one desire being fulfilled and a new desire forming.
So it's like, as soon as we get what we want, we're already looking for the next thing. We're always wanting more.
And that's totally fine. He emphasizes that it's the pursuit, the going after those desires, that gives our lives meaning. Enjoy the journey, the becoming, more than just getting to the destination.
It's like taking the pressure off of needing to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Just to embrace the messiness of it all, the growth, the self-discovery.
Beautifully said. And one of the, I think, most profound things Clear talks about is that our feelings and actions, they're connected.
Okay, how so?
Remember that four-stage habit loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cue, craving, response, reward. Well, now he's focusing on the emotions involved.
So it's not just the mechanics of the habit, but how we feel while we're doing it.
Exactly. He says, and this is so key, how we feel influences how we act, and how we act influences how we feel. It's this back and forth between our emotions and our behavior that creates our habits and our lives.
It's like that fake it till you make it thing, right? If we act like the person we want to be, even if we don't feel like it, eventually those actions might actually change how we feel.
It's like priming yourself for positive emotions. And as those positive feelings become more common, they become a part of you. And then they fuel you. They make you want to keep doing those positive actions. It's this amazing upward spiral.
I love that analogy. It's like our actions and our emotions, they work together to keep pushing us forward.
That's the magic of atomic habits. It's about understanding the science behind how we change and using that to create a life that we actually love, one that reflects our values, our goals, our dreams.
It's pretty amazing how much our habits, they really do shape our lives. And it's not just those big obvious ones. It's like the tiny things we do every day.
Yeah.
without even thinking. They add up over time.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about this atomic idea. Like, even tiny changes over time, they can lead to big results.
It's like shifting our focus away from those huge, overwhelming changes and looking at the small steps, those little improvements that really make a difference in the long run.
And one of the things I really took away from Atomic Habits is that it's not about being perfect. It's about always growing, always getting better.
So it's not about reaching some finish line and then stopping.
Nope, not at all. It's about enjoying the process, always working on becoming better, knowing there's always room to grow.
I like that. It takes the pressure off, right? Like you don't need to have everything figured out right now. You can just embrace the journey, even the messy parts.
For sure. And it goes back to what we were talking about before with happiness. It's not about finding this perfect state of happiness and staying there. It's about enjoying the process, working towards your goals and growing along the way.
So, how do we make sure we're going after the right goals, the ones that really matter to us?
That's where reflection comes in, being really honest with yourself. Claire talks about asking yourself, are these habits still working for me? Are they helping me get where I want to be? Do they make me feel good?
It's like checking in with your habits, making sure they're still helping you create the life you want.
Exactly. And sometimes that means letting go of habits that aren't doing that anymore, even if we've had them for a long time.
Yeah, that can be tough. It's easy to get attached to our routines even when they're not really helping us.
It's true. But just like we clean out our closets, get rid of things we don't need, we've got to do that with our habits too.
Make room for new habits, better ones.
Exactly. And Clear has this awesome framework for designing those new habits. It builds on everything we've talked about.
Okay, tell me more.
He calls them the 4 laws of behavior change. They're like rules for making good habits stick and breaking the bad ones. First, make it obvious. This is all about cues and triggers, making that good habit stand out so you're more likely to do it.
So, like, if you want to start running, put your running shoes by the door.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
The second law is make it attractive. This is about connecting that habit to something you enjoy, something rewarding, like remember temptation bundling.
Right, like if you want to read more, you could make a cozy reading nook and have some tea while you read.
Exactly. Third law, make it easy. This is about reducing any friction, making the habit as easy as possible to do.
So, like prepping healthy meals ahead of time so when you're busy, you don't just grab junk food.
Exactly. And last but not least, make it satisfying. Make sure that habit gives you some sort of reward, even if it's just a small feeling of accomplishment.
It's all about celebrating those small wins.
Yes, if you use these 4 laws, you can basically design a system that makes those good habits stick.
It's like a recipe, but instead of ingredients, you're using these laws to shape your actions and your life.
Love that. And as we finish up this deep dive into atomic habits, I think the biggest thing to remember is that it's not about being perfect. It's about always getting better.
It's about knowing that you're going to mess up, you're going to face challenges, but that's okay. Those are chances to learn and to get stronger.
It's about believing you can always grow, no matter where you are right now.
This has been such a great deep dive. Atomic Habits, it really is a fantastic book full of wisdom and practical advice. It's changed how I think about those small changes and how much potential we all have to create amazing lives just by focusing on our habits.
Couldn't agree more. I've loved exploring these ideas with you.
And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you. What's one small habit you're working on, either building it or breaking it? Share your thoughts with us on social media or even with a friend. Let's keep this going.
And remember, even the tiniest actions, they can make a big difference over time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.